from my perspective, almost all of the descriptors of the red pill line up perfectly with Christian ethics. It's when you get into prescriptions that we start having troubles. So, for instance, I know you're infamous for this, right? But the have sex with 50 women thing, right?
Yeah.
Just so I make sure I don't get this position wrong, but I can give you like a counter example of what I'm saying.
Yeah, sure.
Can you lay your position on that out?
Why?
Yeah.
Okay, so we would agree, right, that the dating marketplace has changed.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Women have changed, right? They think they're equal to you, the egalitarian thing that we talked about before. So since the dating marketplace has changed significantly and women have more sexual experience now than ever before because they think they're men and they can have sex and have relationships just like men, etc., and be promiscuous and not deal with the same ramifications. What guys have to do is kind of go in and understand how women operate in today's day and age. And I think a good way to do that, right? Obviously, there's a multitude of ways, but one way to do it is obviously to have experience so that you're not getting into a relationship or a situation with a woman and you're not aware of her nature and you don't know how to deal with it. I kind of like, I like to use the analogy all the time. If you know you got a boxing match, right, in 5 years, right, with a very good and skilled opponent, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to play video games the whole time, or are you going to train and get ready for the biggest fight of your life, which I look at as marriage? Because
so it makes you worldly. Makes you worldly.
Yes.
Right? And
yeah.
I think we don't disagree that that's true.
Yeah.
The Christian ethics pushback to this would be,
of course.
But wait, you want, this is a requirement or something which is helpful to make you a high value man.
Yeah.
Well, this in turn would give this hoe value.
But I don't determine a guy's high valueness from having sex with a lot of girls. I think a man being deemed as high status or high value is from his effort and his merit that he develops on his own, and then the women are byproducts.
But he has experience now, and experience is going to help him be high value, right?
I wouldn't attribute him being, because there's guys that are high value that don't get girls. Like I wouldn't say like they're successful, they're smart, they're ambitious, etc., but they don't get girls. Mm-hmm. Maybe they don't go out enough. Maybe they don't care to.
Oh, right. But they're more likely to get them if they want them, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, they're in a better position.
Yeah.
They're because it's a byproduct. But my thing is, your value as a man is not attributed to the amount of girls that you have sex with. I just think it allows you to be a better test of character. You're better able to assess the character of women when you've dealt with them before, so that you don't get finessed out of the value that you created.
But wouldn't the entailment of that be that you're high value? Like the entailment of I have X amount of experience that helps me with my value. Like that's going to be a portion of that. And so kind of the rebuttal that we would have is we would say, okay, maybe
I just don't attribute like a man's sexual experience to him being high value. I think it helps him with assessing a partner.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't. But him being high value is completely independent of having sex with a lot of girls. I think the women are a byproduct of his success.
Okay, so he is successful.
Yeah,
it's easier for him to get these chicks.
Yes,
right.
And I think if he's gonna go ahead and partake in women, he should have some experience. Is what I think, gotcha. Especially when he's higher value and he has a lot to lose. But I'm not gonna sit. If I take two guys, right? Mm-hmm. One guy is making, one guy is wildly successful, etc., and another guy's wildly successful. One has a partner count of 1,000, the other one has a partner count of 0. To me, they're still both high value. Just one chose to use his value to attract way more women than another.
But would you make it a prescription then? Would you tell men you should do this? It's good for you to do this.
I think if you're going to go and be marriage-minded and try to find a girl to take seriously, you should have some experience.
Then that has to add to the value.
I don't think so, man.
I don't see how. If you're saying if you want this thing, and this thing is to get married to a high-value woman, right? To somebody who you consider to be virtuous and good and this type of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're saying that having sex with a multitude of partners is then going to up your chances of being able to do this thing, to accomplish this thing, then I don't see how it's not attributing to the value.
I completely, a man's value in him having sex, they're independent to me. Okay. I look at, like, you can be a virgin as a guy and still be a high value dude. Yep. Is how I look at it. I think the women are just a byproduct of your value.
But it is a prescription that you would make?
If you're, your prescription as far as, the 50 girls.
Yeah.
Yes, but you can be high value and not take that prescription.
Right, but you must see some value then in prescribing it.
More, and the value is from protecting your value. Does that make sense? So
Sure.
that
totally makes sense.
The value is you
but that's why I
protecting your
think if you're
value, but you don't need the women for that value.
Right, but I think that here's the entailment.
Yeah, sure.
So if you're prescribing, have sex with 50 women, okay, this is your prescription and the prescription has value, then whatever the hoes are that they're sleeping with, that's an entailment. So the hoe has to have value.
Not necessarily.
Well, you could call them like pawns.
I mean, they would be necessary for you to sleep with 50 women, right?
I mean, if you can
follow
get
that
by,
prescription.
if you can get by, right, with less, sure. But I think a decent barometer is 50 in today's day and age because it will put you in a position where you'll experience a multitude of different girls with different personality types, different behaviors, different red flags, different green flags, etc. So you'll have a general rubric of like, okay, these girls that go to the club all the time probably aren't good. I've dealt with like 3 of them now. Okay, these girls that go to that are from a sorority and maybe not so good. So like you kind of have an idea of like, all right, this is you get a generality of things.
Well, so to like the olive branch, the meeting you halfway. I would not say for a second that the more sexual experience you have and the more worldly you are, that you're not going to have experience in dealing with worldly women. There's no doubt. Or women who aren't worldly. You're still going to have experience in both. All I'm saying is that I think it's a logical entailment to say, I'm going to prescribe that you go sleep with, let's just say it's 20, right? It doesn't even have to be 50, 15, 10, 5. It doesn't matter. You and I both know the types of women those guys are going to be sleeping with are going to be easy women, and they're going to be low-value women. They're basically going to be hoes. So if that's the case, that the hoes are who they're going to be sleeping with, then we have now entailed that hoes have to have value, or else you couldn't sleep with them.
I think it's kind of
I think all women have inherent value though, even hoes.
Yeah,
because like all females have some type of value because they're women. But as far as like attributing that value to yourself and taking her serious, I think that's a different thing. So you got to figure out which ones are, worth a relationship and which ones aren't. And I think the way to do that is through obviously experiencing
Now, from our view, from the Christian ethicist view,
sure,
they have no value. They only have human value.
Okay.
But they do not have, I would consider them at the lowest end of the,
if they're not virgins, like what
of the value hierarchy. Women who are very promiscuous and they see sex as a tool or as a utility or as a manipulation device or things like this. Instantly, the Christian ethicist is going to look at this and say, this is completely sinful, needs to stop, you're totally valueless.
Yeah, fair.
Right? Your humanity is still very valuable. You as a person still very valuable. Your salvation is really important to us.
Yeah.
But this type of sinful behavior from our perspective is completely degrading to society, and we need to stop it by almost any means necessary, because what ends up happening, it's like an enclosed system. What ends up happening from my perspective is that degeneracy leads to degeneracy, leads to degeneracy, leads to degeneracy.
Okay.
I mean, who would ever have envisioned that this would be the world we live in?
Yeah, it's crazy.
But if you back it up, if you look at kind of the slippery slope argument, quote unquote, that started with an LGBTQ push for equality, and once they have it, you have nothing else to complain about. You have to move the goalpost to the next victim group. Then you have to move the goalpost to the next victim group. And it becomes more and more and more absurd. And that's why you'll see the pendulum eventually is going to swing back the other way by necessity.
If I may, we're not arguing on I want to say religious standpoint. It's more of a logical standpoint.
Sure.
Let's be honest here. You yourself, if you weren't versed in women, you can choose for yourself the wife you have today, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So on some level, we do need to have women as, I won't say pawns, I said pawns earlier, that's kind of wrong. I would say an experience booster to understand what I really want in my life or what I actually need. So I think on some level, you still need to have that experience as a man, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see your the Christian viewpoint, and I think all religions pretty much have, whether it's Islam, Judaism, Christianity, they're all pretty much, like sexual degeneracy. It's not in our best interest here from a religious standpoint, which I completely understand. That's why I'm when I dispense this advice, it's more from a strategic standpoint of, okay, if you're not a religious guy, etc., right? Most women are not religious, right? They're just not, unfortunately. Most people are secular in today's day and age. So I look at it like, okay,
Even the religious.
Huh?
Even the religious are more secular.
There you go. Exactly. So like, so my thing, I look at it like, okay, though religion is great, and I think it's a great framework for people to operate in, unfortunately, we don't have those like training wheels anymore. So I think like for guys to really like move in this new sexual marketplace where, like you said before, these girls a lot of the times are fucking 304s. How's a guy that's been a virgin his whole life, super devout, has the rose-colored glasses on, doesn't know how women really move in today's day and age, how's he going to be able to tell if a girl really likes him or she's just selling him a dream, like, oh, I'm pure, etc. Like he won't know. Right now, of course, thank God there's content like this where we might be able to curb him having 50 bodies, and he might be able to only do 20, 30, 40. He might not need the full 50 because we're telling him, hey, this is what it is, right? They always say a smart person learns from their mistakes, a wise person learns from another person's mistakes.
Yeah.
Hell, on this show, we tell you guys our mistakes all the time. So people maybe are, with all this information, they're able to curb it, right? And learn from an earlier standpoint. But a lot of guys, what I've noticed is, a lot of guys are stupid. Let's just keep it 1,000. They got to fucking burn their hand on the kitchen stove to figure out that it's actually hot. And that's why the information is usual. It's like for the general masses. Are there smart guys out there that will figure this shit out with less? Of course. But I think for most guys, especially as hard-headed guys, with 50 chicks under your belt, man, you should at least be able to figure out the girls that are worth a relationship versus the ones aren't. And then most importantly, the girls that are trying to sell you a dream of, oh, I'm pure, etc., and you find out that they're a 304.
I have a question, Andrew. How would you solve this issue?
Solve the problem
of men finding valuable wives.
Yeah.
This is pretty complex. Okay, so
our adaptation is kind of like for today's day and age. If you're not like a religious guy, but what's your
so backing it off. Not gonna let you guys get away totally with this, so I'm bringing it back.
Okay, sure.
It's not a diversion, but I'm bringing it back. Okay,
sure.
Okay.
So from a secular perspective, it can't be fixed. From a secular perspective, it can't be fixed.
Sure.
Secularists have no moral foundation at all. Like it or not, they don't. And it really can't be fixed. However, what I can point to is this. Let's assume for a second hypergamy is real, right? I assume that it is. Okay. I think generally speaking, there's enough evidence that we can look at and we can say hypergamy is at least it's real enough.
Yeah.
Right? It's real enough.
Agreed.
It used to be under control. It used to be under control.
Yeah. Religion used to put under control.
Like it or not, we had that shit under control and under lock and key.
Religion, shame, families, fathers, all these things used to combat it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Secularism destroyed all that.
I agree.
And so
I agree.
When I say to people, and I understand the argument, we're never going back to that, but we are. We are going to go back to that, and I'm going to explain how. It's not going to be in our generation, but if you look at the birth rates, the global birth rates, they're in massive, rapid decline, and it's a problem most people have no idea about yet, how bad the population collapse is really going to be.
It's very bad, especially the Western countries.
But you know these stats. What age are women on average now getting married?
Into their late 20s, 30s now.
30 is the average age, right?
Yeah.
I think it's 31 is the average age last time I looked. How many kids are you going to have as a 31-year-old woman?
Very few.
Very few.
Yeah.
Well, these women are becoming quicker and quicker genetic dead ends, but so are secularists in general. If you look at the religious reproduce far and away more than secularists reproduce. Cross-generationally, this is going to become worse and worse and worse. As people leave the Protestant churches, they're moving towards Catholicism, Orthodoxy, more traditional churches. There's big pushes in those churches to have families and to have children and to reproduce. You know, the old, adage for Catholics, right? You know, if you don't have 10 kids, you have no kids, right? Reproduction is the future.
Yeah.
The religious reproduce, and secularists are not reproducing.
That's why London has been taken over by Muslims.
That's right. But the West has not rang the alarm bells just yet. They're just now talking about it in Congress.
Yeah.
But then what's another side effect of that? Your domestic population is not reproducing. How do you keep the number at 330 million? There's only one way to do that, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to be with immigration coming in.
Yeah.
And, well, that creates instability all on its own. And then what happens if you start pulling in immigrants from other nations and they have a reproduction crisis?
Yeah.
Right? So if you look at all the downsides of a coming population collapse, you can see that religion's going to make a pretty heavy comeback. And you see it already being fought about now. Secular ethics can't offer people anything. It can offer them only hedonism. But ultimately, it can't give people purpose. It just says go find your own purpose. But what the hell does that mean? That doesn't help anybody. How does that help people to tell them, well, just go find your own purpose? Like, well, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to find purpose, right?
Yeah.
That's what I came to church for, is to find purpose.
Yeah.
Secularists can't provide that.
So I agree with you, Andrew. I think in the future things will change. However, right now, what do you do?
Well, so right now, you should try. I mean, this is me again. If I look at the historic trends, most men were never able to reproduce anyway. Okay? Some 60, 70%.
Yeah.
They were never able to
Only
reproduce
a minority.
ever. That's why we have double the female ancestors to male ancestors, right? I would still say that the best thing that you can do is to try to live an integrity-filled life, and that at the end of that life, regardless of how it went, right? Maybe you didn't get that hedonistic pleasure that you wanted, but neither did your ancestors. They didn't get that either. And I think hypergamy has always been this thing, this issue, and that women have been this way. We have Helen of Troy to look at. We have Samson and Delilah to look at. We know that this is the nature of women. But we also know that most men were never able to reproduce, ever. And most of the women that we have right now, if we have men going out and turning out hoes, if we have them going out and turning out hoes, doesn't that hurt the future men? You know what I mean? Who want to get lay down and marry these women? If we're going out and turning them out, that seems like it's counterproductive to me.
I see your perspective.
I could also argue though they've already been turned out. like no, they're already there. They already made.
Yeah, well, I mean, there had to be a ground zero. There was a ground zero penis somewhere.
Remember, you mentioned feminism and the culture itself, the music. They did all the work for them. We just come in and, hey.
Well, I mean, he said it earlier. Like, if you're going to continue to stay secular, it's never, which I agree.
Yeah.
Like, it's never. And that's why because I'm looking at it like, okay. Because I see, and I want to actually ask you how you think it'll go back to being a religious state. But let's assume that it's not, right? Let's assume that people are going to continue to live free and secularism, etc. I'm looking at it like, okay, there are guys out there that want a family. There are guys out there that want to one day, because I think the nuclear family is the backbone of any society, any thriving society. As a matter of fact, the reason why we're so fucked up now is because we don't have a lot of nuclear families anymore, right? When I was in UAE, for example, I saw strollers everywhere, families together, etc. I don't see that here. Hell, even in Miami, I see people walking dogs more than walking with kids.
Yeah.
So,
the little dogs too,
the little ones too, the weird
dogs,
ones.
Yeah.
So I say all that to say this. For the guys out there that do want a family one day, etc., and I don't want them to get destroyed by the divorce machine, right? I'm like, okay, you want a family, you want a wife. This is very risky in 2024 with the way women are programmed, right? So I think one way to deal with it is to have experience with them, and so you can at least rule out the bad ones. I'm not telling you to find the perfect girl, but at least be able to rule out the bad ones so that you can have a family with a chick and she won't destroy your life.
But what if
that's the only reason?
What if there's a better way in marriage, though?
Sure, go ahead.
What about covenant marriage?
Okay.
What about using covenant marriage and the ecclesiastical authority of the church to govern the marriage, where you actually have communities? One of the big things that's missing from...
Can you explain that to me? Because I'm not Christian, so...
Islam has their own form of ecclesiastical authority. They wouldn't call it that, okay? But in Muslim nations, they have Sharia law. Sharia courts will actually adjudicate marriages. They'll adjudicate all sorts of things from the religious authority.
Yeah.
Christians have always had this. We've always had an ecclesiastical authority. The Catholic Church has it. The Orthodox Church has it. The ecclesiastical authority is a way to govern your life and govern your marriage, exit the state. And you can enter into a covenant marriage, and they do not just let you go. They do not just release you from your vow. And if you have community pressure, that's the social shame you're talking about.
Yeah.
What's going on right now?
I'm a fan of marriage without the state involved. I've talked about this.
And you should be.
Yeah.
Because what's happened instead is we have traded a good ecclesiastical foundation with community for this crazy-ass contract where it's easier to break than a cell phone contract.
Yeah.
And women have all the incentive in the world to break it.
Yeah.
Why in the world would we ever endorse, from a Christian perspective, to get involved in a secular marriage? That's the worst idea on planet Earth. We should be recommending covenant marriages through the church, governed through the church and those communities, your own community.
Gotcha.
That's where you get the social shame. That's where you get the pressure.
Yeah.
That's where, because right now, if you go and you involve yourself in a secular marriage, you go to the courthouse, you get married tomorrow.
Yeah.
Where's the community?
Yeah.
Where's the support structure? Maybe your family, maybe not.
TikTok.
Yeah.
You know, it's just you and her against the world. That's insane.
It is.
You know what I mean? You have children, you have financial woes. You got to have a community.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, there's a reason why the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child, that's why. Because And shame is a very powerful thing, and I agree with you because we've talked about this. If you're going to get married, we always tell guys, if you're going to get married, do it through. Don't make sure the state's not involved, right? Go if you're a Muslim, go ahead and just get married at the mosque
Or by the church.
or by the church. I wasn't aware. What's it called? Ecclesiastic.
Yeah,
Basically by the church, basically.
yeah, the
Okay.
church.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Okay. So.
Yeah.
Um.
And if you have marital problems, you go to the church.
Yeah, and I think that's a fantastic way to get around it. You know what I mean?
And you should.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the most successful marriages in the United States, you want to know what some of the most successful ones are? Mormon marriages.
For sure.
Why?
Yeah.
The Mormons have their own
Community.
church authority and community
Yeah,
that
community.
applies significant social pressure. They're like, no, you don't get to just do your husband like this. You don't get to just do these types. Oftentimes, they don't even involve the state at all.
Yeah.
State's not even, you get married within the community in the eyes of God, because that's what marriage is. Marriage has nothing to do with a state contract.
Yeah.
The state should only be involved in things which are good for the entirety of the nation. Marriage is now not good. And that's terrible. That's an awful position to be in, to have the state promoting something as toxic as marriage through the state now is. It's a raw deal for men. It's a bad deal even for women, ultimately, because they have the incentive to do it, and then they seem to regret it. They take years of regretting this, and it's like, if we're going to change this, fine. But let's actually move towards that, towards actually changing these laws, actually moving against the laws. And where the tradcons get it wrong is they refuse to engage with the red pillars, saying, listen, we're getting destroyed. Men are just getting destroyed out here. They're getting wrecked everywhere, right? And you hear their stories over and over again. And I see these guys in the Daily Wire, they're like, well, you could get lucky. You might get lucky.
One of these days.
I got lucky. Look at me. I got lucky.
Yeah.
Look at him. He got lucky too.
Yeah.
Right? Well, that's stupid advice. Why would you ever give advice like that? Instead of looking at the problem objectively and saying, look, there's really nothing inside of our religious purview that says that we shouldn't be pushing back against state authority for marriage, since we consider it to be in the eyes of God, not in the eyes of the state. That's what we should be pushing for. That's what the traditional conservative side is supposed to be pushing for. Religious institutional marriage, forget the state. Totally worthless.
Well, so if we're doing that, then I look at it like, okay, well, let's say you make a bad mistake. Let's say you don't have the 50 body count. You got 5, right? Or maybe you're a virgin. You get married to a chick. You didn't know that she was a 304 before. And then she goes ahead and, breaks up with you and, breaks your heart and shit like that. Well, at least you can get out of it now where you don't owe a bunch of money
That's right.
to her or whatever it may be. That's one way. But, again.
It's also, when you have a church backing you, right? That's a heavy force. People forget the institutional power and community power churches
Of
have.
course, of
And
course.
community shame is brutal.
Yeah.
It is brutal. And you have some churches, they have, serious institutions. It's the last institutional authority of the right, and we don't use it for anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, my thing is, because when I give my advice, I'm like, all right, I'm assuming they're not Christian, they're not devout, they're gonna get with a chick that isn't Christian, not devout, they're secular, etc. So I'm like, okay, that's how most young people identify nowadays.
Yeah.
Right? We don't live in a Christian society anymore, unfortunately, right?
do not.
We don't. So I'm looking at it like, okay, this is how you deal with the new normal. Is it optimal? Should you be running out there and trying to fuck 50 girls in general? Well, no, because well, yes and no, because chasing after girls, I've always said this, going after women inevitably puts you in a situation where you're not fucking productive. You're fucking texting girls all the time. You're going out on dates. You're going to nightclubs. You're
spending
maybe
money and
consuming alcohol. You're spending
resources,
money. You're
yeah.
spending resources. Like, the pursuit of women in itself is extremely labor intensive. So yeah, it's annoying. But like, I look at it like, I'd rather you do this work up front, know how women are, then you do all this work, make yourself high value, then you have the time finally to go ahead and date, and then you go ahead and you date, you find a girl, she's really a whore, but she sells you a dream, you go ahead, you get married to this girl, and then bam, next thing you know, state's taking half your money. But with what you said, okay, we're getting married only through the church or through a mosque or whatever, and you are not incentivized to leave me.
Right.
Well, I could meet in the middle ground there, because the guy isn't going to be destroyed. But knowing that most guys are going to do what? Their dumb ass going to go to the church. Sure, I'll go ahead and sign here so you can have half the money because I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
Because that's what most fucking guys are going to
Yeah.
do, right?
It depends on what we're pushing them towards.
Yeah.
You
So
know?
if they're going to do that, right, and go through because let's be honest, a lot of modern day women, they won't accept getting married just by the church or just by a mosque. They want the security
Yeah.
that comes with
But wouldn't that be a red flag?
state-sanctioned manner. That's true.
But wouldn't
would
that be the red
that would
flag
be a
where you're
huge red
like,
flag.
wait, you won't get married to the church? I thought you loved me.
Yeah. You're right, but dude, see, the thing is that we're having a higher IQ conversation here at the table because we're able to understand this.
Yeah.
Most guys are fucking idiots, man. Let's keep it 1,000. They're fucking idiots. They're like, pussy.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll sign the contract. Like, it's crazy the things that guys will do for women. It's fucking scary, man. Like, when I do some of these consultations with these guys and they say what they've done for women, etc., and looking back to, like, I'm an idiot, 2020 hindsight now, etc., but when you're in love with a girl or you don't know better or whatever, like, these guys really put themselves in very dangerous situations with these women. So I'm like, fuck, like, if you guys are gonna do this and sign your life away and go to a courthouse and marry this chick that you know has all these red flags, like, goddamn, at least have some experience, man, before you go into the slaughterhouse. So that's how I look at it. But I agree with you, man. If we can go back where guys can go ahead and get married through the church or the mosque, and there's no incentive for the woman to leave them, yeah, fuck yeah.
See,
My only other pushback then really
Sure.
is when I think, because you and I both know, probably all of us at the table know, like, high value man is kind of a nebulous term. Don't know exactly what that means, but I think
Very nebulous.
I think heuristically we know.
Yeah,
right.
it's very nebulous.
So we can be like, a guy purports himself well, has enough money to take care of himself, handles his responsibilities, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think we kind of know it when we see it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's fair. But when I think of high value too, I institute things like virtue. I think of virtues. I think of integrity, virtue.